Yes, Burkina Faso is currently building a thermal power plant in Ouagadougou. This is at the outskirts of Ouagadougou, and this is the state of the work.
What happens when a nation that has lived in the dark suddenly announces its biggest power project ever? Burkina Faso has just revealed plans for a 150-megawatt thermal plant in the suburbs of Ouagadougou, the largest in its history. In a country where blackouts define daily life and millions still wait for electricity, this is nothing short of explosive news. But why now? Why has a nation with so much ambition struggled so long to empower its own people? And will this project finally change the story? Let's find out. Burkina Faso has made it clear to the world. It will not be defined by waiting, by dependency, or by excuses. On the southeastern edge of Ouagadougou, a new project is rising that has already shifted the narrative. A 150-megawatt thermal power plant, the largest of its kind in the nation's history. This is not a patchwork fix or a stopgap measure. It is a bold declaration of intent. Burkina Faso is saying, with unmistakable clarity, we will generate our own power, we will fuel our own progress, and we will shape our own destiny. The announcement arrived with a sense of urgency, yet also pride. Sonabel, the national electricity company, unveiled the project alongside government officials, calling it a decisive milestone in the march toward energy sovereignty. And they are right to use that word, sovereignty. For years, energy in Burkina Faso has been the invisible frontier of independence, the arena where true freedom is either won or lost. By launching this plant, Burkina Faso is no longer merely participating in the energy race. It is positioning itself as a leader, a country ready to stand on its own feet in a region still heavily reliant on imports and foreign grids. What makes this project remarkable is its scale and vision. At 150 megawatts, this plant will not only eclipse earlier projects like the 22-megawatt Ouagadougou station or even the celebrated 55-megawatt Kosoto extension, it will dwarf them. Its capacity makes it the single most significant addition to the grid in decades. More importantly, it has been designed with modern technology that emphasizes efficiency and reduced emissions, proving that Burkina Faso is not simply adding power. It is doing so with an eye towards sustainability and innovation. This is infrastructure with foresight. The symbolism is powerful. In a continent where too many governments have been paralyzed by endless studies, donor conditions, and foreign lectures on what sustainable energy should look like, Burkina Faso has acted. It has put steel in the ground, machines on order, and plans in motion. This is not the language of hesitation. It is the language of a state that knows the stakes. Without power, there is no industry, no modern healthcare, no education that competes with the 21st century. And with power, everything changes. The plant also speaks to a deeper narrative of self-reliance. For years, Burkina Faso has imported electricity from its neighbors, a lifeline, yes, but also a leash. Imports meant that the stability of Burkina Faso's grid was ultimately tied to decisions, shortages, or politics beyond its borders. With every new domestic project, especially one of this magnitude, that leash weakens. The country is tightening its grip on its own future, refusing to be at the mercy of anyone else's power switch. This announcement is also deeply political in the best sense of the word. At a time when questions of legitimacy and leadership dominate regional headlines, delivering visible progress in energy is a masterstroke. Speeches inspire, but electricity transforms. And every home, every factory, every hospital that will soon benefit from this plant becomes proof that Burkina Faso's leaders are not waiting for handouts, but building a legacy brick by brick, megawatt by megawatt. Yet behind the triumph lies an even bigger question. If this plant is a bold new beginning, what exactly is the old system it is designed to replace? What is the story of Burkina Faso's energy landscape that makes this project such a dramatic turning point? To understand why the 150-megawatt plant south of Ouagadougou matters so profoundly, you have to look at what it is designed to replace. Not simply blackouts and shortages, but an entire system that kept Burkina Faso dependent on forces beyond its control. For years, the nation's energy story has been one of survival under constraints set by geography, global markets, and foreign leverage. Yet rather than surrendering to that narrative, Burkina Faso has turned it into fuel for resistance. The country's electricity grid has always operated under pressure. Landlocked and historically underfinanced, Burkina Faso relied heavily on imported electricity from neighbors like Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. On paper, these imports offered a lifeline. In reality, they came with a hidden cost: vulnerability. Whenever regional supplies faltered or political tensions flared, Burkina Faso was left exposed. Entire cities could dim because of decisions made outside their borders. That is not energy security, that is energy dependency. But the challenge was not only external. Domestically, Burkina Faso's energy mix leaned heavily on diesel fuel, bought at international market prices that rose and fell with global oil politics. Every spike in crude prices in New York or London found its way into the bills of families in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso. Each fluctuation strained government budgets and forced Sonabel to choose between subsidies, debt, or higher tariffs. The lesson was bitter but clear. If you build your future on fuel controlled by others, you are building it on sand. This is why the new plant is framed not as a luxury, but as liberation. Burkina Faso is no longer content to survive on the margins of someone else's grid or someone else's market. By scaling up domestic production on a level never attempted before, the country is flipping the equation. Instead of importing stability, it is creating stability from within. Instead of waiting for permission, it is proving that sovereignty begins with the simple act of producing your own power. And here lies the deeper truth. Burkina Faso's struggle with energy has never been a story of helplessness. It has been a story of resilience. Even with limited means, the country built stations in Bobo Dioulasso, Ouagadougou, Kona, Kosodo, Kumsilga, and beyond. Each plant may have been small by global standards, but each was a brick laid on the road toward independence. What outsiders called shortages, Burkinabe saw as challenges to overcome. What critics described as gaps, the nation treated as stepping stones toward sovereignty. Now, the 150-megawatt plant represents the moment when all those smaller steps converge into a leap. It is Burkina Faso declaring that it will not be bound forever by the limits of the past. And while international commentators may talk about costs, fuel, or emissions, they miss the central point. For Burkina Faso, energy is not just about engineering, it is about freedom. Still, the story of energy sovereignty is never written in abstractions. It is written in the physical reality of plants, engines, and grids. Which leads us to the next question. What exactly does Burkina Faso's energy landscape look like today, and how do the pieces already in place connect with this bold new project? Let's pause for a second to say big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue. If the new 150-megawatt thermal plant is the bold leap forward, then it is worth remembering that Burkina Faso did not arrive at this moment by accident. The path here was paved by a network of plants already built, expanded, and adapted under pressure. Each facility, no matter its size, has been a milestone, proof of a country that kept building even when others doubted, kept advancing even when resources were scarce. Take Bobo Dioulasso, the industrial hub in the west. Its 43-megawatt power station has carried the city for years, feeding factories and households, ensuring the region could anchor itself as more than just an agricultural base. Far from being a footnote, this plant is a foundation stone. It gave the second city its heartbeat and kept production alive in one of the most dynamic corners of the country. Then there is Ouagadougou's 22-megawatt plant, commissioned in 2012. At the time, it was hailed as a turning point, a symbol of a capital determined to modernize. And while its capacity looks modest against today's ambitions, it was the bridge that showed the city could rely on its own infrastructure rather than depend entirely on imports. In that sense, it wasn't simply a plant, it was a statement. The Kona thermal plant adds another layer. Built initially to serve mining operations and later integrated into the national grid, its 22-megawatt contribution speaks to Burkina Faso's pragmatism. When the private sector needed energy, it invested. When the nation needed resilience, that capacity was harnessed for the common good. It is a model of flexibility, proof that Burkina Faso can adapt, repurpose, and make every resource count. The Kosodo power plant extension, at 55 megawatts, was the next frontier. With advanced German engines meeting international emission standards, Kosodo was not only about adding capacity, but about embracing modern technology. It demonstrated that Burkina Faso could partner globally without being reduced to dependency, choosing technology that strengthened national capacity while respecting environmental commitments. Towering above them is Komsilga, the pride of Ouagadougou's outskirts. With around 190 megawatts under its belt and expansion underway, thanks to support from the West African Development Bank, Komsilga stands as a symbol of scale, a reminder that Burkina Faso has always aimed higher, even when resources were scarce. It is the plant that has carried the capital through its toughest years, keeping the city alive when demand threatened to overwhelm the grid. Nor should the smaller stations be forgotten. The 7.5 megawatt facilities in Fada and Gourma and Wahiguya may not command headlines, but in their regions, they mean everything. They bring light to towns that would otherwise lean entirely on imports, proving that Burkina Faso's energy strategy has always been about inclusion, not just building in the capital, but extending the grid to every corner of the nation. When mapped together, these plants tell a story of steady progress, brick by brick, megawatt by megawatt. Critics might look at the numbers and see insufficiency, but to Burkinabe eyes, these stations are chapters in a book of resilience. Each one was built in defiance of scarcity. Each one pushed the grid a little further, and each one showed that even without vast wealth, the country could take ownership of its future. Now, with the 150 megawatt plant set to rise in southeastern Ouagadougou, the pieces converge. What began as scattered lifelines is becoming an interconnected system, a backbone strong enough to carry the nation into a new era. But infrastructure alone is never neutral. It is political, economic, and strategic. The real question now is, how will this new plant reshape Burkina Faso's power, not just in megawatts, but in sovereignty, diplomacy, and legitimacy? That is where the heart of the story lies, and it is where we turn next. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. In Burkina Faso, energy is never just about electricity, it is about sovereignty. Every kilowatt generated at home is one less that can be dictated by a neighbor, a donor, or a foreign corporation. This is why the announcement of the 150 megawatt thermal plant cannot be read as mere infrastructure. It is a political statement, a declaration that Burkina Faso will write its own energy future, even if the rules of the global game were designed to keep it dependent. The country's leadership has understood something that many outsiders have missed. In the Sahel, electricity equals legitimacy. You can make speeches, pass laws, and raise flags. But when the lights go out in hospitals or factories stall in darkness, faith in leadership evaporates. Conversely, when the lights stay on, when students study under bulbs instead of candles, when clinics run equipment without interruption, the government is not just present, it is indispensable. That is why this plant, more than any policy paper, has become a symbol of governance in action. Sonabel, the national utility, stands at the center of this strategy. For years, it has been both praised and criticized, carrying the weight of a grid stretched to its limits. Now, with the new plant under its control, Sonabel is positioned as the guarantor of Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Every megawatt produced is not just electricity in the grid. It is a political shield, proof that the nation does not need to beg for power from anyone else. Financing adds another layer of strategy. Burkina Faso has shown remarkable pragmatism in balancing partnerships with independence. The expansion of Komsilga was backed by the West African Development Bank, while the Kosodo project brought in German engineering. These were not acts of submission but tactical alliances, deals in which Burkina Faso extracted technology and funding without surrendering control. The 150 megawatt plant will likely follow the same path. External collaboration on Burkina Faso's terms, not foreign control disguised as assistance. Critics in Western capitals may scoff at the decision to continue investing in thermal plants, arguing that the future must be solar, wind, and hydropower. But Burkina Faso's leaders have answered with clarity. The people cannot wait for ideal conditions. Renewable expansion is already happening. The Zagtuli solar farm stands as the largest in the Sahel, but thermal plants provide the reliability required today. Waiting for Western green finance to trickle in would mean decades more of dependency. By choosing immediate stability, Burkina Faso is proving it will not allow its citizens' futures to be held hostage to foreign timelines. There is also a regional dimension. For too long, Burkina Faso's energy security was tied to imports from Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana. While cooperation remains important, dependence creates vulnerability. A single disruption in cross-border transmission could throw Ouagadougou into darkness. By strengthening domestic production at this scale, Burkina Faso is reshaping the balance of power in West Africa. It is not simply another consumer in the regional energy market, it is becoming a player with leverage. This is why the 150-megawatt plant is more than a facility. It is a gamble, not a reckless one, but a calculated risk that the gains in sovereignty will outweigh the costs of diesel imports. If the gamble pays off, Burkina Faso will be remembered not as a state trapped by its geography, but as one that turned its limitations into strategy. If it fails, the critics will say they were right all along. But Burkina Faso has chosen to bet on itself, and that act of defiance in itself carries political power. And so the question naturally expands. If Burkina Faso can rewrite its energy story at home, what does this mean for Africa as a whole? Could this project be part of a continental shift, where nations stop waiting for outsiders and start building their own sovereignty, one power station at a time? Burkina Faso's 150-megawatt thermal plant may rise in the suburbs of Ouagadougou, but its shadow stretches far beyond the capital, far beyond the country itself. It is not simply an energy project. It is a declaration that Africa is capable of solving African problems on African terms. And in that declaration, Burkina Faso has positioned itself as a vanguard, a nation refusing to wait politely for the West's approval before powering its own destiny. Too often, Africa's energy future is narrated by outsiders. Western think tanks speak of gaps and deficits, painting the continent as a perpetual problem to be managed. Donors talk of transitions that never arrive, while private investors demand conditions that chain nations to dependency. Against this backdrop, Burkina Faso's decision to act boldly, to build decisively, is revolutionary. It shows the continent that sovereignty does not come through permission slips. It comes through action. The symbolism cannot be overstated. At a time when Western capitals warn against fossil investments, Burkina Faso has chosen pragmatism over lectures. Its leaders know what too many foreign consultants ignore, that citizens need light in their homes today, not in some distant future written in donor reports. By building thermal plants alongside solar projects like Zagtuli, Burkina Faso is crafting its own hybrid model, one that keeps the lights on now while laying the foundation for renewable strength tomorrow. This is not a contradiction. It is a strategy, and that strategy matters for the continent. Every African nation grappling with electricity shortages faces the same dilemma: wait for ideal financing or act with imperfect tools. Burkina Faso has answered the dilemma by moving forward. The lesson is clear. Sovereignty is not given, it is taken. Each megawatt generated at home is not just technical capacity, it is political independence, diplomatic leverage, and national pride. This is why Burkina Faso's plant resonates more than domestic infrastructure. It challenges the very way Africa has been positioned in the global order. No longer as the continent that needs saving, but as the continent that acts, builds, and innovates under its own command. And if one of the Sahel's most challenged states can take such bold steps, then what excuse remains for larger, wealthier African economies still waiting on foreign permission? The plant also signals a generational shift. Burkina Faso's population is overwhelmingly young, and this youth is hungry for opportunity, innovation, and growth. Power is not just about light bulbs. It is about factories that employ, hospitals that heal, and schools that prepare the next wave of African leaders. Every megawatt is a weapon against unemployment, poverty, and inequality. By investing in this plant, Burkina Faso is not only powering the present, but is defending the future of its youth. Of course, challenges remain. Fuel imports will be costly. Expanding rural electrification will take time. But these are obstacles, not definitions. What defines Burkina Faso today is not scarcity, but courage, not dependency, but determination, not weakness, but sovereignty. The plant embodies a message the world cannot ignore. Burkina Faso will not sit quietly in the shadows of others' narratives. It will light its own path, and in doing so, show Africa that self-reliance is not just possible, it is inevitable. And so the story comes full circle. From the announcement on Ouagadougou's outskirts to the vision of a continent rising, the lesson is the same. Power is sovereignty, and sovereignty belongs to those who dare to seize it. Burkina Faso has dared. And in that act, it has lit a torch that Africa can carry forward. Is Burkina Faso showing Africa how to break free from energy dependency? Let us know in the comments section. Should sovereignty come before waiting for Western green promises? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.